Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome to In the Room. Kind of a combination of like In the Room and Matt Talk Online. At least my side of things is from the Des Moines Register. Matt Talk Online is its own podcast beast. Cody Goodwin here, sports writer for the Des Moines Register, the wrestling writer with Des Moines Register, here with Jason Bryant. Again, this is a regular thing now that we're doing.
That's a
Hope you guys
scary
will.
thing to consider too, that both of us have this much time to spend this much time with one another.
I mean, what else would we be doing, right?
Well, I mean, you really don't want to know what goes on in this speakeasy with the weird statistical mind that I have. It's I mean, I'm about to whip out an amateur wrestling news here from 1980. January 14th, 1980, a whole let's see, 17 days before my wife was born. So, strange.
That's dude. 1980 was 5 years before my parents were married. So the
Okay.
young guy and the
Yeah.
old guy.
We be
There's
old. Well, I'm
um
old.
I'm getting there, I think.
So what
Um
what you've got here too before we start, we're out on Facebook, we're out on YouTube, or I think we're on the Twitters and the LinkedIn's. But if you're on Twitch, you're a couple different places. When we do this live, I'll have the stream chat up. There you see it there. If you're also on the Discord, which you can jump in at discord.com. Actually, it's matttalkonline.com/discord and the hashtag Speakeasy Live channel. Yes, I'm finally getting to utilize this stuff. So we're going to have some live interaction for those who are going on things. Obviously, we got Jagger in there. It's his birthday today, as a matter of fact. So
wow,
he's
happy birthday,
45.
Jags.
Geez, his jean shorts don't look a day over 70. So
I see what you did there.
dad jokes. Anyway, so there we go. So thank you, Ian Jagger, for helping us out with at least two comments in our live stream. So this is where Cody gets to drive because this is his show, but it is on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. So hence the visualization of the logoage here on our live stream.
Yeah, we're experimenting with a lot of different things. You and me obviously doing a podcast together, going to attempt to do it live every now and again, if not, more often than not. So I guess, driving the bus here, we're just going to kind of see what happens. Today, just, with the World Team Trials coming up this weekend, figured we could probably lead with that, just kind of how we feel about the process, how we feel about the weights coming up, which weights are you going to pay closest attention to, and then second half of the show we can circle back on just kind of a list of things like we've been doing the last couple of weeks, just wrestling stuff that piqued our interest. Do we have thoughts on it? What do we think about certain things? But yeah, we can start with the World Team Trials this weekend in Colorado Springs. The second part of USA Wrestling's Senior World Team Trials process. The winners of the weights that will be contested this weekend will go to Final X, June 10th in New Jersey. Handful of Final X matchups are already set after the US Open. How do we feel about this process, man? They changed it up a little bit from previous years, more or less kind of streamlined it, right? With US Open champs, no matter the weight, guaranteed a spot in Final X. But, with a handful of weights not earning medals at the World Championships, there's a few other spots that still need to be decided. All the Greco spots, handful of women's freestyle and men's freestyle as well. Do we have any initial thoughts on this process? Is it too early to tell? How do we feel?
Well, you'd have to look at this process as a process of a process of a process. And I think it goes back to I want to say probably 2004. And then into the metal blanks that we had prior to that, the Burroughs era, as we're going to title it, ushering into where we've had this great run of medals. So back in the day, I believe '04 was when we were talking about, Kerry McCoy, great wrestler, obviously in his own right, world silver medalist, one of the best NCAA wrestling heavyweights of, I guess, the last 30 years. I guess if we're talking, yeah, it's definitely 30 at this point. He's not getting that old yet. But the Stephen Neal, Kerry McCoy thing is what stands out to me. Is you've got, Stephen Neal was a world champion and then didn't make the Olympic team. So it's like one of those things. Like, are you training to beat one person? Or are you training, or do you want to put the best team with medals on the podium? So that is always like the battle you have. Wrestling, you want to beat the guy ahead of you, and then you worry about the rest of it. But sometimes you want to put people that are out there that are proven to win medals. So the situation with giving a medalist the right to sit out, it kind of hurts on the marketing side of things on the first tier of the process, like the US Open and what we now have is the Challenge Tournament. But in the same point, it does kind of streamline, a year in advance, okay, well, I'm not going to book a ticket to the US Open expecting Jordan Burroughs to wrestle because I know he's not going to wrestle because he won a medal. So there's that part of it. Now then there's the topic of this challenge tournament, which I think when we were the problem was at the Extreme Arenas, it was like a piece of the puzzle. There was no finality to it. Last year, I think that was one of the complaints. And this year it's at Discovery Canyon High School. And before you scoff at Discovery being hosted at a high school, this high school is pretty badass. I've been there when I lived in Colorado Springs. It's on the north side of the city. It's one of those super technical. It's very purple. I think they're the Thunder, if I recall correctly, and I think they had some wrestlers go D1. Kid Turner, I think his name. Which Turner was it? There was a Turner kid that went to Wyoming and ended up finishing up in Nebraska Kearney. But it's a good facility, and it's not
Sam Turner.
a huge Sam Turner. That's it. I knew if I gave you enough details, you'd help me fill in the gap here. But
Just piece the whole thing together.
This kind of is more of a streaming event, this part of it, because people are going to show up and there's going to be people like they don't make the team. They're probably going to be forfeiting out. So backside could be empty except for those that are really trying to make that top 3 national team. So the process is what it is. I think we've gotten used to it. I think having Final X in one spot this year is one of those things that's probably going to help. Granted, it's going to be a long day, but we're going to break it up into segments. I've worked the events at the Prudential Center with Dylan Wanagale, who used to be at Madison Square Garden, who was instrumental in helping get the NCAAs there and bring the grapple at the Garden there, and then now the Garden State Grapple, which I've announced the last couple of years. It's a great facility, and Beat the Streets is going to tie into it again. So this year's event, I think, is cool. We're going to have that. But again, this challenge tournament being part of the puzzle, yeah, it does seem kind of confusing, but it's not as confusing as, well, why does this guy have to wrestle all through this when he's the returning medalist? I mean, I think it helps us put a better product on the mat. It may not be the easiest. Then again, we're wrestling. We don't do things simple ever. So this is kind of par for the course for us. The only thing that is simple is the fact that we wore the same flippin' winners win type of shirts today on Wrestling Shirt a Day in May. He's got the Grandview version. I went with the alphabetical. It's either H for Hager's Happy Hour or I for IA Wrestle. And the hat assist to the Co-College Co-Hawks. Co with a C, Co-Hawks with a K. So I wanted to get that in there before we got too into the World Team Trials. But process, now that it's been advertised enough, there really shouldn't be that much of a difficulty in following it unless you're coming in from the college world. You don't pay attention to anything on the mat.com ever until, oh, that's this weekend. How does it happen? So I think it's fine. And I like we've got that finality. Win the U.S. Open, you're in Final X unless you're a medalist. It's not that simple, but it's not that difficult either.
No, and I like the fact that they put a lot of the incentive on the U.S. Open this year, right? Like that's win the U.S. Open, you go to Final X no matter what, whether there's already somebody there waiting, like 79, for example, with JB, handful of other weights, or 61, for example, if you win, like Vito did, you're the first guy there. And then, they obviously got to navigate the World Team Trials Challenge tournament to figure out who he's going to face. I liked it. Just from a fan perspective, the U.S. Open was, we talked a couple weeks ago, we thought, jokingly, but not quite jokingly, that it was probably the best U.S. Open we've seen in quite some time, both in terms of the talent on the mat, but then also just fan attendance and people following along because they understood the stakes. I liked it. Is this weekend kind of a weird second step? Yes, but it is an important second step. The World Team Trial. I think the biggest thing I think people had an issue with when it came to last year's World Team Trials Challenge tournament was that nobody was there to watch it. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, right? Like you put it in Coralville, which is they do a wonderful job at Extreme Arena. Josh Schomburger, Luke Eustace, those guys hosting wrestling events, high level wrestling events. Coralville's not a very easy city to get to because you either got to go in through the Quad Cities or you got to go in through Cedar Rapids. Costs a little extra because those aren't big airports. On top of that, there wasn't really, I think Cassiope may have been at the World Team Trials Challenge last year. I think David Carr made an appearance, but just not a lot of local Iowa ties, which plays into why Iowa City Coralville area is a huge, wrestling hotbed when it comes to fans. But then on top of that, like I know that like a lot of locals, like Iowa natives who would have come out to watch, like that was the same weekend, I believe, as the state track meet. A lot of grad parties, a lot of graduations at the high school level and stuff, I'm pretty sure as well. Just the perfect storm for literally nobody to show up and be there in the stands. So, you know, you move that to a place like Colorado Springs, where a little bit more central location, a little bit easier to get to, probably. Make it a forced streaming event and just kind of get through that to get to Final X, which I think is, the U.S. Open was great, but obviously everybody wants to pay attention to Final X, either there in person or, like I'll be watching via stream to see how the world team is decides. Because it's the weird part about, last year's World Team Trials Challenge tournament too, at least like from my perspective, is like, okay, Felicity Taylor won the World Team Trials Challenge tournament, for example, but she didn't win anything. You know what I mean? It's like you won it, congrats. Now you got to go to another event and win that, and then you win something, right? Like it's like I guess you earned a spot on the national team, but that's not really conducive when it comes to writing a story that you want people to read. So a lot of different angles about what they did with this year's World Team Trials process. I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm still a wrestling nerd, so I'm still very, very excited for this weekend's competition, even if it may not draw as many eyeballs as the U.S. Open.
Yeah, and again, one thing we have to combat is those of us who are in the trenches with this, and we're in the message boards, the Twitterverse, the Discords, the everywhere wrestling talk happens. The Facebook groups, the Facebook page. I mean, there's just wherever there's content, the Instagram comments, for goodness sake. We got to remember we're so embedded in this. We want everybody to show up to watch our sport, but sometimes we know that there's events that aren't going to draw, and this is one where I'm curious to see what the Discovery Canyon site or something like this works, because we've had junior trials at the training center. We've had them at Palmer High School, which is one of the oldest high schools in the state of Colorado. At one point, it was the only high school in Colorado Springs. I think Lanny Bryant from Wrestling USA magazine went there. I mean, and he wrestled in the 60s at Northern Colorado. So there's some old schools this place has been. But so I'm curious that you don't need a big walkout type of stuff. You need a couple of mats. You need a stream. That high school, as far as I know, has really, really good technology. So streaming shouldn't be an issue. Now, if it is an issue, duck and cover internet comments and Flow Sports. But that's par for the course, because we're gonna want to watch it. And then hey, you're not gonna go watch this if it wasn't 15 minutes from your house, you weren't going to go watch it. So let's get over the fact that we need this part of the thing to really be a spectator event. It needs to be spectator friendly. Yeah, I'm not saying no fans like we had, in the COVID area, the cards. I think the All-Star had limited fans in Austin, but not that. I'm saying we've got a site, we got a place. Most of the people that are interested in this aren't going to travel to see the next step event. So I'm curious on if this is going to be the format that works. It also could open the door to put up, hey, here's a smaller little venue. Let's put it up in Denver. Let's go down to Phoenix. Let's go someplace that's, a relatively decent connection or drive for the athletes, for those that have to go. The one concern I did have is with the athletes being so close to, close to their last competition. Senior level athletes don't make weight nearly as much as we do at the college and high school level. So, and with those weight classes being what they are, and the jostling for the Olympic weight classes in those cases, it's like some people are making tough cuts down to their Olympic weights because this is a qualifying year at the World Championship. So it's a big year to make the team. Then you have the your own destiny in your hands to qualify the weight. So that making weight so close to the U.S. Open, that's something that I'm wondering, the Seth Grosses of the world, I mean, granted, he's, Dayton Fix is a little more comfortable at 61 than he would be cutting down to 57. But I'm curious about those type of athletes, how close to making weight from one to the next. I realize Fix didn't wrestle U.S. Open, but I think you understand my point here.
Yeah. Well, and then, on top of that, that's if so let's use 61, for example, if, Gross or DeSanto or somebody, whoever emerges and gets to Final X, that is, weigh-in at the end of April, 3 weeks later, weigh-in again, 3 weeks later, weigh-in again. Yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see how that impacts them, because like you mentioned, senior level athletes don't usually wrestle that often, at least in succession like that. The other thing too, and maybe this kind of gets into the whole, where we wanted to go from here in terms of what weights are you most curious about or most excited to watch. It's a quick turnaround from the U.S. Open. So Austin DeSanto had a fantastic run, tech fall over Joe Colon, 5-4 over Seth Gross. I know Vito caught him in a leg lace and that was the end of that, but a tremendous run at the U.S. Open. How does he, how does he rebound? He's going to be the 1 seed at 61 kilos. Or how does a Seth Gross or, a Joe Colon or Dayton Fix or some of these other guys, hey, like you saw how he wrestles now. He's clearly figured out this freestyle thing. What are you going to do against him now in a couple weeks when you got to beat him again? One more quick point on the process before we kind of move into what weights we're curious about watching. Not so in previous years, World Team Trials, I believe the finals best of 3 in order to get to Final X. This year, just one match and done. Yay, nay?
I'm good with it. I mean, you put somebody that's already gone through the grind. I mean, it's that many extra I mean, really, I need to win. You already need to win 6 matches to make, if you're not a medalist, you already need to win at least 6 matches to win the spot. So making it 9, I'm just using 6 as an arbitrary number in this case, but 2 to 3 more. You won the tournament. You won those matches to win that. I think that's tough enough. I think you earn the right to that best of 3 one time.
Yeah, I'm sure. I generally don't disagree. I'm sure some people will. Somebody's going to fall
into
into
the confusion too. A best of 3. Oh, and then you go to another best of 3. Just the finals is best of 3. That's keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. Although I know for a fact, because of all the various places that people can put their wrestling comments and sound off on their opinions and whatnot, somebody's favorite wrestler is going to fall into a lace or fall into a trap arm gut, and they're going to be like, "Well, why don't we do it again?" I know it's coming. I know it's going to happen.
NCAA wrestling to be this? Gonna happen.
That was yeah. If people think that we should jump to freestyle,
that's another show. I'm just warning you that I'm ready for those comments too. I love
Dude, they've been happening,
but that's gonna.
They've been happening. 3 weights in men's freestyle are going to be contested. I believe another 5 in women's freestyle. 4, 3. I can't count. 3, and then all 10 obviously in Greco. 4 in women's freestyle. He's holding up.
Yeah, 55, 59, 68, and 76. By the way, I got the mat.com to come up during our break. So I was complaining earlier to Cody that the browser was not playing nice before we started. So, first live show. Let's just have technical difficulty with, I don't know, the website that is the lifeblood of this particular series.
Well, now we can yell at Richard Immel if there's an issue with the mat.com.
I got another. Well, I don't have do I have a reason to yell at Richard Immel? I helped him move and pack up his stuff this weekend because he's heading to Colorado Springs as the next in line behind Gary Abbott, and I helped him move while my wife watched their daughter. So my 2 daughters were getting to babysit with their young daughter, and it was cool. And then out here in the speakeasy, we shot some darts, cracked open a 2.5-year-old bottle of barrel-aged stout from Bent Brewstillery here. It was cellaring it. It wasn't just sitting out. No, I had it in the fridge color. So it was, tap that one open and was good to go. So, yeah, I'm going to blame Richard for a couple things. This might not be highest on that list right yet.
Glad to see the websites are working. 3 men's freestyle, 4 women's freestyle, all 10 Greco weights going to be contested this weekend. Start with men's freestyle. I feel like the easy answer is all 3 because all 3 of them have different levels of intrigue. But which weight are you most curious about / most excited to watch this weekend?
Of those 3, it's DeSanto has been appointment viewing for various reasons through his entire, basically since his vision quest to beat Spencer in high school. So, his quick first period tech falls at Drexel, his transfer to Iowa, the Kimura Gate, whatever you want to call it, Austin DeSanto's exciting style of wrestling and his unpredictability. It's like he's appointment viewing. So you're going to watch him when he wrestles, whether you like him or not. So Dayton Fix also has a little bit of lore or air to him about, he can be the villain sometimes with, kind of slowing things down, or he can get that quick trap arm and end a match quickly. And then, Seth Gross, a guy that made the semis at the World Championships. I mean, those top 3, and it's easy to look at the seeds and say those are the 3, but I think there's really cool storylines with any of that triangle of matches. And this talented guys, Nashon Garrett, never had a chance to win that world medal, got hurt, and then Joe Colon wins the medal in his stead. So. Tomasello's been a guy that's been there. He's been there. He's beaten all these guys. It's like, historically, I'm not saying specifically he's beaten these guys, but those top 3, I'm curious on what that's going to look like. Again, to your point about, getting laced up, are we an Aiden Valencia upset away from having well, wait, this is the finals of the challenge tournament kind of thing. Or at 92, that's also one intriguing because I'm curious where handsome Nate Jackson, to borrow the blood round phrase, is going to be because I think he's the best guy in the weight. The question is, can he prove it? Can he get on that world team? I mean, he's taken a match from Jaden Cox at Final X before. I mean, this is a guy that you want to see the big cram doubles, not the crunk doubles. One time I put my foot in my mouth and went crunk. He's like, hey, say crunk. No, it's cram. So big cram double from handsome Nate Jackson. And then, of course, heavyweights. We've got a great crop of athletic mobile heavyweights. So yes, the political answer is all three weights, but I think that there's storylines within each. And I'm just curious on Tanner Sloan. Now let's get the Iowa angle in there. Al Burnett represent, like, he's a past medalist. This is at the age group level. So he's going to be a problem for matchup wise because he doesn't have a whole lot of looks with these guys. So he's the guy I probably am paying the most attention to, and he could hit up with handsome Nate Jackson early. So depending on how the brackets fall, if somebody pulls out or whatnot. So yeah, all three you want to watch for, and I'm just those matchups and those particular individuals are who I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, 92 is super intriguing with Zahid bumping up, with Tanner Sloan joining the party. All sorts of interesting. Heavyweight, I think, is interesting because it kind of showcases the depth a little bit. But I think what we've seen the last few years is that there's kind of, I don't know, Mason Paris kind of showed that he was that dude this year in college wrestling. So I'm kind of curious to see, if him and Hendrickson meet in the semis, which is where they're supposed to meet if that's, the seeds hold ultimately. Where does Tony Cassiope stack up against Mason Paris? He wrestled him a really, really close match this year in the duel. And then in the NCAA semifinals, it was not close whatsoever. So what's that look like? Can the ageless wonder that is Dom Bradley make another run? Because he just always seems to be in the mix there.
Man, you people at your age always say anything in your 30s is old, man. Come on. Gee, like Dahmer's not that old. I mean, I think it was a junior world champion, like I want to say 2010 or something like that. But yeah, easy on the age stuff, man.
I'm just saying, man, like he's well into his coaching career and still just coming out every year and finding some magic at the US Open and coming out and still wrestling. I love it. Maybe
no
it's because
hockey boards at Discovery Canyon High School, though. So the boards are safe. Hockey boards are safe. No Iowa Heartlanders 2 minutes for boarding here. I do want to point out too. Remember, Americans, we tend to have this watching freestyle with folk style eyes is kind of how I describe it. It's like, why are you're watching a match and, well, that's not too, well, don't watch it like folk style. It's a different style of wrestling. So when you consider it's a different style of wrestling, the depth of this weight class that you alluded to, but we got multiple time world medalist Gwizdowski, junior world champ Paris, junior world champ Bradley, U23 world medalist Walls, U23, is it juniors or U23 with Cassiope? I think it was U23 world champ.
Two-time at U23, two-time medalist. Yeah.
A medalist. So you've got age group medals in this style. So this is not like, oh, they were good and now they're the NCAA. Throw your NCAA credentials out the way. These guys know how to wrestle this style of wrestling. So Demetrius Thomas, a lot of people may have like, what? Yeah, he was at Pitt, but he was also an NAIA national champion, NAIA finalist at Williams Baptist. Shout out Kerry Regner during his time there. So want to throw the NAIA love before he transferred to D1. Big Meech, not a whole lot of freestyle background, but a guy that, as he gets better and gets better, he could be a tough out. Although, I mean, if I say that guy's a tough out and I'm like, Wyatt Hendrickson, it's like these guys are so flipping good. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I think I love all three of these weights. I'm excited to see kind of how they all unfold. Obviously, the local ties are what I will be paying close attention to, but also, I don't know, man, like that's and these guys like have to win this weekend to get to Final X. Like that is how deep USA Wrestling is at some of these weights. It was very apparent at the US Open, and it's going to be even more apparent at these three men's freestyle weights as well. Women's freestyle, 4 weights, like you mentioned, 55, 59, 68, and 76. I feel like 76 is the weight to watch, but I feel like we can make a case for virtually every other weight as well. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to veto that one. 76 is head and shoulders, depth-wise, talent-wise, above the other 3 weights. And again, I'm not saying that to throw shade at the way. It's just depth-wise it is. I mean, you've got some good athletes here. You got a world champ, Jakara Winchester. You've got, an experienced Lauren Mason at 1-2 at that weight. But then we also look, Maya Nelson, okay, junior world champ. Jen Page, been right there, on the cusp of making world teams, and she's got a junior world medal. Alex Glaude, been there a while. Emma Bruntel, still waiting for her to break through to make that first team. Always been scrappy. But then Adeline Gray, Yelena Makoya, Diamond Gill, Kylie Walker. I mean, then Precious Bell was in Final X a couple years ago. She's the 6th. So I just it's there's a clear line of the depth of the weight. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be any less competitive, but the depth of the weight at 76 is head and shoulders. Now the question is as another month enough for Adeline to get her form back? Because making the finals before she got beat by Kennedy Blades, she still looked, a little rusty. I mean, she got taken down early by Sydney Kimber. Of course, we know about the Diamond Guilford match, but is another month enough for her to get her? I don't think it's a head thing with her in this case. I think it's just her, physically being able to compete again at where she's used to. So I think that's the key to watch there. How does she match up? I mean, she's not going to be on the side of the bracket with Guilford this time. So she going to see Kylie Welker early. I mean, Tristan Kelly is a Colorado kid who's tough out as well. Big, strong, young, hungry wrestler. So, and then, Mako had Guilford. That was a a wacky one last time, and Welker, I think, is the an X Factor. Welker and Gray. That one I've got real interest in seeing just based on their styles of wrestling.
Yeah, well, and rematch of the Olympic trials finals, right? And that's, the other interesting thing too is like Adeline Gray just being able to do what she did at the US Open and coming back for more after giving birth to twins. Not quite in the same vein, but Kylie Welker back wrestling consistently again after, injuries had kind of put her on the sideline for a little while. She wrestled a little bit during her redshirt year with Iowa women, but not a ton. I think she got a trio of matches in at the Soldier Salute before she had to injury default out of her last match, just kind of a funky step with her knee. But then she looked good at U20s, up and down a little bit at the US Open, which is to be expected. So really curious to kind of see where she's at. One of those matches at the Soldier Salute. I think she wrestled the same. I think it was just like a 3-person round robin and everybody just wrestled each other twice, just to try and get matches. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious to see where she's at. Stacked weight, really excited to kind of see how it unfolds. I was trying to give the other weights the benefit of the doubt, but yeah, it's head and shoulders 76. But like you mentioned, like it's going to be interesting to see how some of these unfold. I mean, 59, for example, Maya Nelson, Jen Page was just literally in the US Open finals at 62, was up 8-4 at the break, if I remember correctly. And then Adugo Nwachukwu came back and just stormed through and beat her. Chikara Winchester, past world champ. How is she going to look at 55? Alicia Hauk is waiting in Final X. There's a lot to like about these women's weights. 59,
they're going to be fun to watch.
They're going to be great.
To me, the question was the depth and where, is one better than the other? I think depth wise, 76. And then, yes, they're going to be exciting weight classes. That is not going to be disputed. Although I do think this could be opportunity for an Amanda Martinez to really kind of break through at this senior level thing. So that's somebody who I'm looking at 55. I'm like, okay, I'm curious about her in that weight more than anybody else. And if I look at 59 to say, what's going to go here? Lexi Bastion made Final X last year, and it was a situation to at Texas Wesleyan where, the coach had left, or I won't say left is definitely the wrong way to put it. That situation wasn't great. And so Abby Nettie made the world team last year. So it's deep-ish, but it's unproven consistently. So, I mean, even Maya Nelson, after, she won a junior world title in Finland, I want to say, was it 17? Was it 6 years ago? Is that long ago? So, I mean, she's coming back, and I'm waiting for her to regain her form. She was in Final X, a couple years ago. So they're on the cusp of those senior teams, and they've been to those tournaments as training partners and stuff. So, again, this is an opportunity to know what it's like to win a tournament again, then go into Final X and, okay, I can reset myself. So these 4 weights are going to be fun to watch. They're going to be fun to watch. Now, how dominant anybody is remains to be seen.
Yeah, no, I think that the way these tournaments unfold could go a long way in shaping how we feel about the Final X matchups. Because obviously the women who are waiting at Final X, Kennedy Blades at 76, Forrest Molinari at 68, Michaela Beck at 59, Alicia Hauk at 55. Obviously, they're very, very good. Otherwise, they wouldn't already be in Final X. Greco, all 10 weights are being contested.
Timmy
We'll
Hands,
wait.
do your Greco preview. That's what we need because that's what it's going to take to assess this. I'm going to just jump right in. I think 77 probably is the one I'm circling. Again, you want to talk about old, okay? I am older than Alexander Kikinov, okay? He looks older than me, but he is in much better shape. But looking at that weight class, you've behind him Jesse Porter won the Olympic trials. Rayvon Perkins has been on age group and senior level world team. So, yeah, the 4-5 with the right to face Kikinov in the semifinals is one that I have interesting. Of course, I always point to some of the guys from that place in Norfolk. Tim Young, the number 3, he was in Final X last year. He's joined the Army WCAP. It was an Ellsworth kid, junior college, and then went to that place in Norfolk. He's the 3 behind Bronigal and Stefanowicz. So 87 has some interest to me personally because every time I get to not say that school in Norfolk, me and Brian Hazard, his son wrestled there, and I went 7 years there. So Stetson Bennett didn't invent the super senior. I made it cool before it wasn't cool. Yeah. So I'm I got a personal vested interest in what I hope Tim Young can do there at 87. Of course, then again, we talked about Marsteller last episode in terms of, Johnny Stefanowicz and his brother. Of course, there's an Olympic story right there. So not saying I don't like any of those other guys, but I wouldn't mind calling Tim Young's name again.
Yeah, I 77 was one of the weights that I had written down. Also wrote down 82, just mostly name recognition. Ben Provisor, Andrew Berryessa there at the top, Kendrick Sanders there in the mix at the 5. But I also really like 67. Again, probably name recognition, but just some real fun opportunity for some stories. Jesse Thielke back in the mix of things with Army WCAP, Alejandro Sancho after getting upset by Joel Adams at the U.S. Open. Joel Adams also in this weight here as well, cadet world champ. From nearby Omaha, or at least outside Omaha. Just looks like a fun weight. And then the winner gets RP3 at Final X, who looked fantastic at the U.S. Open. He actually ended up winning the weight where Joel Adams kind of blew the weight up after beating Sancho. Just a fun weight. Really excited to just kind of see what happens. You could probably use that excuse for every single Greco weight, but I don't know. Name recognition obviously helping me pick which weights I plan on watching closest, but I'm excited to see these guys compete again. It was fun to watch them at the U.S. Open, and I know not a ton of people follow a lot of Greco stuff, but I think I've finally come around to there's a handful of people in Iowa that are starting to come around to watching a little bit more Greco, and it helps when there's guys who are kind of local. I know Joel Adams isn't an Iowa kid, but obviously from being nearby in Nebraska, people are paying a little bit of attention. But then also Ben Provisor being at Grandview, there's a lot of Grandview guys that routinely go to these high-level Greco competitions. He's had a lot to do with that. So that's been kind of fun. And, I think other people are kind of slowly, if not, they're not going to sit and watch all of these matches, but they're at least going to pay attention to the results and, maybe go catch the replay if something fun happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of wrestling now is look at bracket, see score that interests you, click play. So also, and I can't not leave out Pat Smith, this Pat Smith, not the Oklahoma State Pat Smith, but Pat Smitty from right up here in Minnesota. So good musician, by the way, too.
There we go.
Another proud Chaskin, if Chaskin's a thing, from Chaska, Minnesota. Andy Beesick's the other one that you've heard of.
There you go. Saturday, Sunday is when the competition takes place. Greco all day Saturday, then men's and women's freestyle all day Sunday. They will both wrap up day of. Any final thoughts? World Team Trials Challenge Tournament to basically decide the Final X matchups coming up.
A lot of purple. Discovery Canyon Thunder. That's all I got. No, I've exhausted my knowledge of the one time I went to a dual meet at Discovery Canyon High School in 2012 when I lived in Colorado Springs. So, by the way, Rich Bender's daughter graduated from Discovery Canyon this weekend, so congrats to her as well. She's got wicked TikTok followers. That's all I want. I got back on TikTok, and she just popped like, wait a minute. Close. I just I don't. They were she was so tiny when I moved away. Yikes. So yeah, now I feel old. There's your old guy stuff. Happy birthday, Jagger.
Go. See, I always like seeing people's reactions because, like, as somebody who works in media, I am on Twitter, I am on Instagram, and that's it. Like, I don't have a Discord profile, I don't have a Facebook, I don't do TikTok. People send me TikToks and I watch them, but I don't personally have an account. I never had
I have
Vine.
127 followers on TikTok. I don't know.
That's 128 more than me because I don't have it. I'm very limited in my scope of media. Which is probably not a good thing, but also like it's kind of allowed me to just like focus on the things that I do.
Yeah, I'm still
So
annoyed that I have to put digital creator on my Instagram profile. I'm just like, and like on Twitter,
digital creator.
media personality. I'm like, I'm a
I've vacillated between like
freaking PA announcer, basically. I mean, that's all my career has been boiled down to. I'm the guy that talks on the microphone.
the guy that I've gone back and forth between like a media personality, journalist, and writer. Just because depending on the day, I could be any one of them.
Right.
I don't know. Twitter and even Instagram titles are kind of goofy. Um, Switching gears, that was the World Team Trials stuff. Second half of the pod, got like a list of things that we can just kind of touch on. Um, but we mentioned it earlier, like it's Wrestling Shirt Today in May 18th. We both went with the winner's win shirts. Mine's Grandview specific. Yours is
Felters synthwave. I think this was from what, Junior Duels, because when I tweeted
the
today, the reattack, which is the Illinois, there's an Illinois tie to it. I don't know if said individual know. I mean, I know who it is, but it's like I don't know if they've actually ever put a name on it, so I won't necessarily out that account here if they haven't done that already. But yeah, I got the barfing emoji reply from that account after I posted this one because Illinois and Iowa like to jaw at the Junior Duels. That also is what makes Fargo fun, and of course. Felters is just 30 minutes out. So, by the way, speaking of which, has the one thing that came from the Willie trials was Feller's name being mispronounced, and it just became a thing. So, he is now Felters. And people refer to him like that all the time. So,
Felter's facts, yeah.
yeah. Synthwave.
Yeah, no.
That's a thing.
I'm glad that like other people post their shirts. I think I've mentioned this before. I don't post it. I do it every day, but this year I'm making an Instagram reel that I'll just share so that I can prove to people that I wore a wrestling shirt every single day. So mine have been, I'm trying to think. I wore one for Kyvan a couple days ago. I can look at this picture. A nod to his when he was calling the Cyhawk duel at Hilton, and DeSanto was behind him, and he was like, "Commentate that." And Kyvan's like, "You want the mic, buddy?" Yeah. They made a shirt for him, and I was like, "Yes, I'm going to wear that." Yeah, I wore that a couple days ago. I wore Blood Round yesterday, so I had to pull up my album of pictures. Team Georgia shirt a couple days ago. Ryder Block from Waverly Shell Rock. Shout out to that guy. He's got a long sleeve shirt. I wore it to the gym the other day. That's the other thing too. If I can't like wear a wrestling graphic shirt for like work for whatever reason, I will wear my wrestling shirt to the gym. I don't know if that's cheating, but I'm doing that and I'm counting it.
I mean, sometimes I'll put on a shirt and I'll get halfway through the morning. I'm like, this one's not, my wife will point out a shirt that doesn't fit well on me. I'm 250 pounds. So some shirts cut are a little different than others. So she'll look at me on that shirt's short. I'm like, well, it's because I'm fat. It's not short. I've just got a big gut that's kind of keeping it out of there. No. So I have a little bit of I like the longer X. I'm in an XL. I'm not in 2Xs, which is, part of the weight that I've dropped over the years and reconfigured. But yeah, I will keep the tri-blends. I will keep, the longer XLs because in my rotation. But this is, again, the month where my wife doesn't put any of my shirts away because I have a filing system for the ones that I've already mapped out and how I'm going to wear. So tomorrow I will complete my tour of Iowa based on the ones that I have with an Iowa State shirt. And it's not going to be the Iowa State shirt that or that you can get at, I don't know, whatever the Cyclone bookstore is. Or I've never been to the bookstore in Ames. I was never at a place with books in college, so they're foreign to me. But then we go to that. So yeah, dad jokes aside, I've got it set out, mapped out, ready to go. Even the shirts that I'm done wearing that are washed, I put on a shelf in my closet so I don't rewear them. Now, I get to the end of the month, I'm probably gonna have to start doubling and tripling them up to get through the alphabet because I alphabetized them. So I'm on, let's see, one with Grandview is the G, and then because I didn't have an F. I had an E, and I went with Edwardsville, of the SIU E for Edwardsville, because I went, I had D, and then I didn't have an E or an F, and then I had a G in Grandview. I had a couple Grandview shirts, including the one I bought year one of their program, which is my favorite long sleeve tee. That is a thicker, heavier one that I wear. The red one was good. And then H, Hawkeye Wrestling Club, I've got actually behind me, just off camera, I got the bottle opener from the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. So that gets used here in the speakeasy. So one of the handle bars, like if you're at not a handlebar, but like, one of the handles that you open up at a bar. How's that for explaining what a bottle opener is to the viewership in the state of Iowa? Busch Latte, the official beer of Iowa. Now, then I go with the Hawkeye Club, and then HI, and then today Hager or IA Russell. So HI, and then tomorrow I finish with the Iowa State reference, and then I move on. So I got a lot of Little Rock shirts. I may just end up wearing one of those when I get to L. So
You are significantly more organized than me. You're also
I
a
did
lot
this
more.
for 366 straight days in 2017. Okay,
I know for a fact
invented
I don't have
this.
that many shirts. I don't have that many shirts. No way.
Yeah.
I probably have like 100.
I did miss a day in there, and I actually had to do the extra day. I missed a day for church. I think I talked about once before. So
that's where you need like a collared shirt or like a really nice like sweater vest or something like that.
it was February in Minnesota.
Sweater.
Definitely wearing a parka to church.
Okay.
So anyway, what's next on our agenda? We got the India drama. This is part of my my newsletter, and this is something that and when I say India drama, I mean actual wrestling drama in the Indian Wrestling Federation, the WFI, the Wrestling Federation of India. If you get my daily newsletter, which you can sign up for at mantalkonline.com/news, there are a number of just stories. This one, usually there's always some drama with Indian wrestling, whether, Sushil Kumar is, he was an Olympic medalist and world champ that, he allegedly was involved in offing somebody or involved in somebody died and he was around. So that was a big blow up a couple, probably 2 years ago at this point. And then he was involved in, was the doping for Narsingh Yadav, who won the spot to qualify in 15, but Kumar wanted to wrestle off without actually wrestling off, and it's drama follows the WFI, and then their pro wrestling league over there had some people not get paid, and it is a soap opera of the highest level, and it's in a country with over 1 billion people, and wrestling gets a lot of headlines there. Their big papers cover it, big parts of the country that have the Haryana and such where the wrestlers come from. But now there's this sexual assault, a sexual harassment charge rather, against their president, their federation president. And he's got 15 different names, so at risk of not saying a name in wrestling correctly as a PA announcer, I'll just say he's the guy. Because I could practice it, but I really don't feel like it right now. Yeah, there's articles. The wrestlers are protesting and sitting in, and it's just story after story after story. It's like Indian wrestling's own Me Too movement. It is nuts.
Dude, and it's been going on for months, too.
Yes.
This started in January. They paused it for a little while because it looked like the Indian government promised to create some sort of committee to look into it. And then they resumed in April, and they haven't been stopping. And there's some heavy hitters here, like Olympic medalist, world champs, Bajrang's there. There's a lot of stuff going on here. What more do you know?
And it's hard to really kind of weed through the Indian media. And part of that is because a lot of the news sources are all there. Some of them there'll be like 15 news stories generated from one source. So you have to weed through, well, okay, is this just a reposting website? And so sometimes you end up trusting the same ones, but I don't really know where we're at because it seems like the story changes hourly because depending on what you read, but the wrestlers want this guy out. And then there's the sports fans. Now the Indian sports fan, wrestling Twitter is just a drop in the bucket compared to like when Indian sports fans get onto something, duck and cover. I think Eric Olenowski's brother, Christian, was doing some social media at the Worlds one year and put the wrong flag. He put, I think, the Iranian flag, and emoji, it's this big, instead of the Indian flag. They lost their flipping minds. And I came to his defense saying, hey, it just, I-in or and it's, just fat-fingered it or something. I said something like that. And then all of a sudden that became fat journalist, racist. I'm like, good night. The kid, and then come to find out Christian's colorblind. So he couldn't see the difference in the dot color and like the flag get that big. So it's like, and it was just, well, then their fans are piling on saying, oh, the wrestlers just don't want to compete for their spot for the Olympics. They want to be given the total deflection from the sexual harassment thing. It is just a powder keg of absolute, this can't be real life, but it is Indian wrestling, and it is It has been, I don't know if I actually have the brain power to process it all because it is just so crazy.
I'm based on what I've gathered. It's a big enough issue that they had to move the Asian Championships last month. They were originally supposed to be in New Delhi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They moved them to Kazakhstan. Um, so that, I mean, big enough to have to move a pretty big international event. It looks like as of last week, 5 officials were suspending for expressing support of the protests. So government workers, I'm assuming,
Yeah,
are
it's
getting in on this. Like there's it sounds like they want an arrest of the accused by next week, or else who knows what'll happen. I mean, they're standing firm here, and I'm based on what I've read, it sounds like they've got pretty good reason to this is some serious stuff, and
yeah. If you want to keep up
good.
to date on it all, again, I'm paying attention to it. I mean, I don't have a separate Google alert for it because it just clouds up the Olympic wrestling feed that I save to throw in there because there's 20 to 25 different links to read almost every 3 to 4 hours because the news cycle over there is just let's post it and go, and that you can sometimes get into some dangerous stuff there in terms of like what is legit journalism and website that looks. I mean, it's so that some of that stuff is trying to cull the herd of what I'm actually putting in the newsletter. So there may or may not be a bum link in there once upon a time, but little grace on that one because that's just a lot of it's hard to sift through because it's wild. I couldn't imagine something like that happening here. I mean, if it's just you know, yikes.
Yeah. Here's hoping that they come to a speedy resolution that is thumbs up for everybody. But I mean, hey, as big as not just wrestling, but like I read something the other day that, Disney Plus lost a ton of subscribers because they decided to drop cricket. And a lot of that comes from, India, and they love their cricket for one, but they also love their sports. And so to see these heavy hitters in the wrestling world throw their weight and throw their influence into a protest like this, like
Mhm.
obviously it's very, very serious. So, here's hoping that there is some sort of speedy resolution, or at least, some clarity, at least for us on this side of the pond, so that we can continue to follow it because this is, you know, sexual harassment in the sport of wrestling. Obviously a pretty heady thing. So want to keep an eye on that story. Couple things we didn't get to previously in previous shows: coaching hires, portal moves. Figured we could kind of all of this into kind of a way, way, way too early look at the 23-24 season. Coaching hires: Roger Kish goes from North Dakota State to OU. In his stead, Obi Blanc gets the job at North Dakota State. Pretty cool, right? Like pretty cool for both parties. Roger Kish going to OU, which is, it seems like it's just a tough place to win, but he has proven to be able to be a program builder at North Dakota State, where now Obi Blanc gets his opportunity to be a head coach. Any initial thoughts on those two coaching moves, or either one separately? I think it's pretty cool, both of them.
Sooner boosters need to be patient. That's the thing. Like they need to be patient. Roger built North Dakota State, and North Dakota State was a powerhouse Division II program. They were winning national championships under Bucky Mon. Great tradition, hard nosed type of wrestler. Goes to far. I mean, you've got to be hard nosed in general just to go to school in Fargo in the wintertime. I mean, my niece just finished up her freshman year there. I'm still one, but she's from north of Duluth, so they've got the hard nose built in there anyway. It's good, and Roger had success there, but in ranked programs, but they weren't contending for trophies. But again, taking the guys that the Power Fives missed out on, or getting that diamond in the rough and signing them early, or developing talent. Finding guys like Stephen Monk, to hit the podium. And, it's not just like, okay, you got one guy that's hitting multiple times. They've had multiple wrestlers hit it. Yeah, Jared Frank was a pretty good recruit, but at the same point, your blue chip, your top 5 guys aren't typically looking at Fargo unless they're trying to win a stop sign. They're not looking to go to Fargo for their college wrestling. And that's what they need to be patient with is Roger can build, but he's going to need time. And it's, you're going from Spates to Cody to Roselli, and then there's there's the Ware and the Lightners that were in the room, and then what's going to happen now. I mean, there's a lot of questionable information that came out of that coaching search. or who was offered the job, who turned it down, who was just checking it in to get bumps in their own salary, who really said, I like, nope, I'm not touching this. So anything with these coaching hires, you really get a very small sliver of what actually happens in the hiring process. And was Roger like the 12th pick, or was he the third pick, or was he the first pick? Who knows? But it's going to take time to rebuild a program. But I just didn't think that Cody and Roselli had, I think with Mark Cody, I think it was a cultural clash in terms of how he runs a program. He runs a program that basically is devoid of, of partying and a lot of socializing. Louis was wired a little differently in terms, I remember talking, he's like, he didn't read the media. He wasn't, paying attention to some things that a lot of coaches are now. So nobody can question what Lou Roselli knows about wrestling and his ability to coach. But I don't know. I'm not sure what goes on in Norman. And that's not, I didn't tug Richard's ear about this either, but I just, from the outside looking in, it's like, you got to give Roger time to build if you want results that you expect Roger to get. You give a mid-major program coach that's done well with limited resources, comparatively speaking, you've got to give them time to adjust to that because, they're used to doing a lot more things hands-on, and now they have a lot more resources. They have to adapt to having that excess that they've had to work and scrap for before. It goes both ways. It's like, having the high-dollar coach that goes to the small school and is like, oh, this is how the other half lives, and builds from there, was it Calipari, wherever he went, or is it Patino? I'm not sure which one went where. Was it Patino that went to Iona? I don't even know.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did for
so
a
that's the
minute.
one, going to small and then going back big again. Whereas going from small to big, you're like, they did that with Cody going from American to OU, and then big to big with Ohio State to OU. Now they're going back to a mid major, but a state school, something that was a little more, I guess, more in line with OU versus American, which is completely different from Oklahoma. So you got to give Roger time to build.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway from the Oklahoma hiring of Roger Kish.
I have two thoughts on this. I mean, one, it obviously drew my attention because there's a little bit of a mini pipeline with Iowa high schoolers going to North Dakota State. Spencer Mooberry from Osage has been up there for the last few years, 97 pounder. More recently, they've picked up a couple of commitments from Max Magena, who three-time state champ here in the state of Iowa, as well as Kofax Christensen from Waukee Northwest, two-time state champ. Sounds like Max is going to stay with North Dakota State. I know he wanted to go to trade school up there, so that was something that really piqued his interest about North Dakota State as a whole. Kofax might poke around a little bit, but I know as of right now, he's still, very public in his commitment to North Dakota State. So we'll kind of see what happens. That obviously piqued my interest. I reached out to both guys just to be like, hey, like Kish going to OU, does that do anything? Obviously, with recruiting being kind of a 24/7 thing now. Just wanted to make sure I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. Second thought, more of a question. I'm kind of curious what you think about this. I don't really know that I have an answer, but why has it been so hard for OU to build not like a winner, but just a program that's like consistently competent? Because it just seems like they're up and down all the time. They always show up at Big 12s, and then 2 weeks later at the NCAA championships, not always as great. They have really strong dual moments, and then they'll have other seasons where it's just kind of like meh. Like what has been the issue?
I really don't know, and I think I have the same questions. Now, from what I know about my friends in Oklahoma, explain that like OU is the brand in Oklahoma, and the brand, and this being non-revenue, or I hate the term non-revenue, but being fans of less popular sports like college hockey and college wrestling, we want those sports to get the billing. Like, oh yeah, well we're here, we got titles, and ultimately, those who are buying the tickets and tailgating on Saturdays don't care about us. And though that's what sucks about being a college wrestling fan is, oh yeah, it's cool to have tradition and popularity in pockets, but wrestling doesn't move the needle in the state of Oklahoma for OU alums like it does in Stillwater. And of course, I think there is that the Civil War with the house divided kind of thing, but
Bedlam.
wrestling clearly is more important to Oklahoma State alumni than it is OU alumni. I think that may have something to do with the perception of who cares in Norman. That's the one. It's not questions like who cares, but it's like who actually does care about do the how many people that are coming to the football games on Saturday? How many of them actually care? And then you'll see that with the arguments like, oh yeah, who cares about wrestling and golf national titles when Oklahoma State's got a ton of them? That's where they're a big part of their national titles are from, and they always like throw it away. Like, dude, you've got 7 national titles or something like that in Norman. So like, why are you going to discredit your own just to like I don't your 34 titles are meaningless. Oh yeah, well so are our 7, but you're trying to downplay yours just so you can downplay everybody else in the whole sport. So that's a bit annoying looking at it based on what I've heard from friends who are both Sooners and Cowboys. It's just like it doesn't seem like Sooner wrestling has moved the needle because John Smith was so freaking popular and had all the old Cowboys back in the days of the Aggies. I mean, the Aggie Sooner battle, the Stan Abel, Tommy Chesbro, all those Myron Roderick eras were fun to be in Bedlam, but Stillwater's always drawn better. So
Yeah, I mean, similar thing up here in Iowa, right? Like Iowa City is, people read about the Hawkeyes, not as much about the Cyclones, and then again, not as much about the Panthers, and that's been something I've had.
well,
I've had. Oh,
there's the
oh,
Hawkeyes, like right here, yeah, right on the front of Amateur Wrestling News, 1980.
yeah, and I've had conversations with Iowa State fans and UNI fans about, like, hey, why does it seem like you cover Iowa a little bit more every year? And it's because like sometimes we have to make business decisions, and you go where will get clicks. You pour more time and energy into resources that will get you, more engaged time that makes my bosses happier, so that I'm able to go do a few more things. There are some obvious decisions that I have to make, like, Iowa State and UNI wrestled on the same night as Iowa, Michigan. I was in Cedar Falls that night because that's, 2 in-state schools. I had to be there, but I do my best to try to get to every single home duel so long as the schedule works out for all 3 programs. But sometimes we got to make tough decisions. And I don't like having to make tough decisions because I would like to cover all 3 equally. But I mean, that's just not what happens, And I tell Iowa State and UNI fans all the time, I'm like, yo, if you guys read more, I will be able to do more. But
Click more, buy
I
more.
need you guys to read more, right? And for a while, like Iowa's the team that they're always going to be that team. For a while, Iowa State was one of those teams, and then Kale left, and they fell into a little bit of a funk, and now Dresser's got them back as an exciting program again. I think just a steady trajectory. I think they got good quickly. Now they're kind of on that fringe of pretty good to, they still haven't cracked the top 10 at the national tournament, but they're pretty firmly a trophy contending team now if a lot of things break right. They were a couple of blood round wins away from being in the top 10 this year. So, they're trending upward. UNI is always a team that's going to be really scrappy. They're going to, they had 2 guys in the blood round in addition to Kekeisen being in the finals this year. Like I would love to write about all 3 programs equally, but it's not the case. And so I imagine through that lens, like I get it. Oklahoma State is the brand down in Oklahoma, and when Oklahoma wins, people are interested. Like I think there were a lot of people that were interested in Iowa State in December when they took Penn State to the brink, when they bumped their lineup, and beat Cornell, who turned out to be the 3rd best team in the country this year, tournament wise. When Iowa State and UNI wrestle, I think it was a couple of years ago, they both went down to Oklahoma and swept both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Like those stories were widely read because, like when's the last time that happened? I had to look that up before I wrote the story. So I get it, so in the same way that it's probably a little bit tougher for Iowa State and UNI compared to Iowa. Yeah. OU compared to Oklahoma State, it's probably a little bit tougher, but it's just, I don't know. Oklahoma seems like one of those programs that just wrestling's a lot more fun when they're good. Similar to like Iowa State, right?
Agreed.
Like wrestling's just it's a lot more fun of a sport when that program specifically is good. And there's a lot of programs like that. And I think OU falls into that category. So this is me outwardly wishing the best for Coach Kish to turn it around in Norman, no matter how long it takes. I hope OU administration gives him however much time he needs. I hope he does it quickly. But we're smarter than that to think he's going to be able to flip this thing overnight.
Yeah, and that opened the door for Obi Blanc at North Dakota State. He'd been an assistant there for 4 years. Now, here's what I wondered the first thing. One, Obi's been ready to be a head coach, and now that he's got that opportunity, I really, really think he's just a go-getter type of guy. But Obi's from Naples, Florida. He's of Haitian descent and from Naples. The guy has been a warm weather guy. I mean, the coldest he was before this, we went to Lock Haven, and then then finished up at Oklahoma State, and then has been coaching a couple of. But dude, you're putting roots, and I'm saying roots for a reason. You're putting roots down in Fargo, where again, Obi's hard nosed because he's willingly staying in Fargo. He's also got an assistant hire coming this week that I think people are going to love. I'm at the request of that individual. I'm not dropping it here, but it's going to be a good one, and I think it's going to be like, okay, it's going to be a bit of a splash to see what's going to happen, and a bit of a youth movement there. But Obi's going to be a really good head coach, and the key is how many of his guys is he going to be able to get to stay? Obviously, there's the problem. That's the good problem to have, I guess, if you're an athlete. It's like, okay, which coach did you connect with? I mean, like if Obi's going to connect with those recruits, boom, there you go. Okay, and then Roger's the boss, but I think Obi also solved a bit of an issue for the administration to try to hire somebody in short term and not lose their entire team, not hit. With the coaching hire, you've got time for the portal to hit, but I think Obi's going to be a good coach there. He's just a real student of the sport, very personable guy, been super friendly, can go into a living room and really connect with parents. Young guy's been on the world level, been on a world team. 1 year he was our highest place, went to world championships. Granted, those were some bleak years, but he was winning the match in the quarters. He was this close to being in a medal match in wrestling for a medal back in, I want to say, 2011. But a guy that can constantly evolve and learn, because he wasn't a freestyler coming up, and then he ended up making world teams. So and he's also a guy that was in programs that had to, he was at Oklahoma State, but he was also at Lock Haven, and he's been in the Power Five, and so he knows the game in terms of resources, recruiting, and then what it's like to have to fight a little bit harder than when you have a lot of resources at your disposal, where you're expecting people to come to you. He's a worker, and he's going to work hard to keep kids in Fargo and get kids in Fargo, because again, you got to be wired a little differently to want to go to school in Fargo,
or you just got to be
turf.
Yeah, I was gonna say, big fan of chocolate milk, right? Like that's the main draw for North Dakota State. I'm joking, obviously, but
I thought it was South Dakota with the cows. That was the gateway thing. No, anyway, those my talking points with Fargo. Other than I'm going to year 23 or 24 coming up, so something like that. Probably got a new program or something coming. Moyer's beeping in on me, so I'll have to get back to him on how many college women's programs they're adding. Which, by the way, I actually made an incorrect statement to him the other day as we segue into the new program coming to Newberry College, a Division II program, and that will be factually right now it's 89 NCAA women's teams, 4 in Division I, 31 in Division II, now 54 in Division III since Lyon College in Arkansas is reclassifying from the NAIA to Division III, 43 in the NAIA, and 26 junior colleges. So there's your women's program update with corrected numbers, because I spent time with Lori Ayers the other night, texting him like, hey, numbers on the site don't match with what we had. And it's like, all right, now we're matching up. Now we're good.
Well, that leads me to a question.
Okay.
And this is a question that people have asked me. I have posed to other people, kind of curious to see what you think. Who's going to be the next D1 to pull the trigger?
Why hasn't it been Arizona State yet? That's what I want to know. I want Oklahoma State. Why? Why not? I mean, John Smith talks about, the growth, like coaching women's wrestling. Like, it's a big thing. Okay, who's it? Like, it's got to be a program with money, because if you don't act now, it's going to be Iowa that's going to run the shot, because it's the one. It's got a lot, from an educational standpoint. That's one thing where a lot of the young women coming out of high school, like they want to go into bigger programs, because the educational options are bigger at those big Big Ten schools. Got a lot more academic options than, say, a school in middle of North Dakota. Again, let's keep with the North Dakota theme, like, to compare that to a Jamestown or out in Montana at the University of Providence. So the options are going to be bigger at these state schools, and it's going to be an instant draw. And compared to the Presbyterians and Sacred Hearts, and Lindenwood's making the transition, but those schools don't have as many academic options as an Iowa does. So it would be a slam dunk for somebody to do it. I think right now the hindrance may be the travel. Who do we compete against? Because look at where Arizona State is. There's not much women's wrestling around there. So, hey, Penn State, pull the trigger. Hey, Oklahoma State, pull the
just
trigger.
do it.
Hey,
Just
no,
do it.
hey, you know what? You know what? Why don't you take all of the joy from Iowa? Start women's wrestling, see what happens. Okay, that could be interesting. But I mean, why not? North Carolina, Coleman Scott. You got Marisol Nugent on your program down there. I mean, NC State. You want to get one over on the Tar Heels? You fire one up, Pat. So I mean, you're going to be competing against a lot of Division II and Division III schools when you start it up anyway. So losing to those type of schools is not really an enticement for a Division I to start, because it's going to happen unless you hire Clarissa Chun and then hire an Olympic medalist like Tonya Verbeek on her staff. So, the pick of the litter's had a chance to come to Iowa already, and they're going to hit the ground running next year. And it's, I think, on paper, they've probably got to be the favorites. And, for the National Collegiate Women's Championship side, because we have 2 divisions now, and the NAI, Southern Oregon, Gabby Wyrick did a great job. But, is it Oregon State? Nate Angle, Women's Freestyle Coach of the Year out there at the Beaver Dam RTC. So Oregon State, you've got an opportunity. And women's wrestling has been at Pacific since it's one of the first 3 or 4 programs out there. So that's what I'm thinking. It's going to have to, it's Oregon State, Penn State, Oklahoma State, Arizona State, NC State, or North Carolina. Give me one of those programs.
I kind of figured that a place like Oregon State or a place like Arizona State, or for a while, Wisconsin had a pretty strong women's RTC until they cut it. Oklahoma State, just because of the history, but mostly, like Oregon State, Arizona State, programs that had strong women's presences in their RTCs. I figured that it makes so much sense to do it there. And now I've heard various reasons for various different schools. I've heard that a sticking point for some schools might be the fact that women wrestle freestyle collegiately as opposed to folk style. So there are ADs or administrators who are a little hesitant about that.
That's just weak sauce, because men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse have different rules. Men's hockey and women's hockey have some different rules. There's quarters in women's basketball. There's halves in men's basketball. That the style difference is okay. You can do one-man mechanics as an official. Granted, you want to do 3 for perfect world, but you've got 2. Their excuses are there for convenience. They're not there for actually any legitimate reason. Oh, well, we don't know. Well, if you're an AD, it doesn't know something about something. Isn't your job to learn versus, well, we don't know. You haven't researched it. We know you're lying because you don't. It's just, if you don't want to add it, just say you don't want to add it. It's that simple. But, we're looking for ADs with spines these days, and those are kind of a dying breed.
Another sticking point that I've heard is money. What does it cost to launch it?
Cheaper than starting a lacrosse program, or cheaper than starting a women's ice hockey program, or cheaper than starting any field sport or any sport that needs, unless you've, equipment is not cheap for those other sports. Field hockey, not exactly a cheap sport to start. Swimming, the pool upkeep alone, that's one reason swimming's had some troubles, is the facility upgrades year to year to year to year to run those things. So wrestling is one of the absolute cheapest sports that isn't just creating a sport out of something that already exists, like beach volleyball or indoor track and field. So,
and this is where, a place like Oklahoma State makes a lot of sense, because they're about to get some pretty new upgrades for the men's program, right? What are you going to do with the old facilities? Why not hand the keys over to a women's program, right? That seems to make sense to me. I know that's very surface level, and there's probably a lot of logistics under the surface that they're going to have to figure out, but why not?
I agree. We're in a new era of everybody thinking money. This is where we should have gotten on the women's wrestling bandwagon 30 years ago on the college scene. I think we'd have more men's programs right now if we did, if we as a sport weren't so resistant to girls and women wrestling to begin with. We've had a world championships coming up on 30 plus years. So if we'd have gotten on the board, I said this, if we'd have gotten on board like girls soccer did, my kids have done soccer. It's not like they're playing it, but they've practiced and play. I'm just like, really? It's wrestling is sport just like any other. We missed the boat on that 35 years ago. And our resistance to keep this, oh, it's a boy sport, it's a men's sport. That's what's really hurting, because now we're having to fight that battle all over again. Whereas all the other women's sports, they were there ready to go because, oh yeah, we can do that. We can do that because, okay, yeah, you boys and girls basketball, great. It's different. I mean, it's just, it's so many ways we could have, if we could go through a time machine and undo some things we did as a sport, that would be one of them. It's not the legislation that was the problem. It was also us sitting there going, no, girls don't wrestle. Well, if we'd have had our leaders in that era say, yes, girls wrestle, we'd be way, way ahead of where we are right now. Not having this conversation, be like, hey, I mean, what's the 50th school that's going to add women's wrestling? Not the 5th.
The last reason I've heard is that there are a lot of ADs and administrators who are just plain hesitant because they want to see what the support looks like for Iowa first, the first D1 Power 5. Now, that's not very fair because you're looking at Iowa, a place that the men's program has led the nation in attendance each of the last, 16 years
16,
now.
Yeah.
This is a state that has been ready for girls and women's wrestling for many years now. Like literally the first sanctioned girls state tournament this year, day one, sold out Extreme Arena. Like, heck yeah, man.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not Discovery Canyon High School. That's not
right.
Waverly Shell Rock High School. That's a 5,000 seat arena.
Yeah, 5,003, session one, day one of the girls state championships sold out. That it helps that the national tournament for it's the NCWWC, but I keep calling it the NCAA Women's National Championships, or at least the placeholder for that until it becomes official. Going to be in Cedar Rapids for the next couple of years. So when Iowa starts wrestling next year, going to be pretty easy for folks to just drive up the road and watch them compete. Like you said, they're probably going to be at the top of the heap with North Central, McKendree, all those other programs. But my issue with ADs wanting to wait is because Iowa fans are going to make the Iowa women's program and the wrestlers and the coaches look like rock stars. The ADs are going to fall so far behind. And by the time they actually get around to launching these programs, like you mentioned, Iowa is going to be so far ahead from some of these other Power 5 programs that it's going to take them even longer to try and catch up to them, at least in theory, right? We don't know what it's actually going to look like. We can we can guess because of how we've seen all these women wrestle at various age level tournaments at the US Open, what we saw at last year's NCWWC national tournament. I mean, that North Central squad is stacked, man. There's a lot of really good wrestlers in that program. Same for McKendree, well-established women's program. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. But there is something to the idea about women wanting to go wrestle for the Iowa brand. The fact that they get to wrestle for Clarissa and Tanya Verbeek. And, oh, by the way, Gary Mayab is there.
Oh, by the way. Yeah.
Iowa's building this brand new wrestling facility that's going to be open next summer. That's only going to help recruiting even more. Like, I don't know. It's frustrating because I feel like for the last year or so, people have asked me, I don't know about you, but they've asked me, who's the next Power 5? And I'm like, I have no clue. Here's who I hope it is. Here's why I know it's going to take a while. And it's those three reasons primarily. And I don't like it, but
that third reason, if that's the reason, then why haven't you? Oh, well, we're waiting to see how Penn State does. We're waiting to see how Iowa does. Well, why doesn't that work on the men's side? Because if Iowa's your benchmark for women's wrestling, why haven't you looked at men's wrestling and started it then? Because that it's like, yeah, you sell out your arenas. Oh, we don't want that. We don't want to create that. No, we're gonna wait to see how that. Oh crap, we're late.
Right? Yeah.
So that being said, I don't know the answer to that one.
Interesting discussion. Shout out to Newberry, though. There's an Iowa high school kid, former Iowa high school kid, Andrew Reed from Southeast Polk. Shout out to Andrew Reed wrestling at Newberry. So excited to see that they're jumping on the women's wrestling train. I think that was mostly it on my list. I know there was a couple other media musing things that we always have on our list. Do we want to get into those to close out today's show?
Yeah, why not? Because I want to throw this one out there because it's making the rounds and it comes back to Carver Hawkeye. Let's take it back to 2012. We'll stay with the theme here of this being an Iowa-centric media experience for those watching and listening. 2012 Olympic trials were at Carver Hawkeye, and Zeb Miller, who of Go Ohio Casts, and he was one of the early camera gophers for Flow. And I don't want to say that sounds kind of negative, but Zeb was one of the early guys that was traveling around to tournaments and doing interviews. And Zeb's a great dude. He wrestled at Kent State. Just he's a great mind, and he had some of the best calls in early flow, it's a junior high move when Matt Cathell rolled him with whatever it was just like a wrist roll and just pinned a kid and. I think it was the Ohio State dual meet or something like that, or he went nuts when Drew Lashaway beat Jay Jaggers, or I think those were the errors. But Zeb has been a guy that's never been afraid to ask a direct question. And the question was, the clip has been circling around on social media again, and it was him asking Steve, is this the last we've seen of Steve Mako? And Mako just turns and looks and goes, I didn't leave my effing shoes on the mat, did I? Or something along those lines. And it was just like it personified Zeb Miller asking questions he doesn't care. I mean, he gives no, beeps when it comes to asking a tough question or just asking a very direct question. He's not sitting in the press conference going, talk about, leading with a talk about type of thing. So not saying anybody that does that is negative, because I've done it before, but that was one of my favorite quotes. And it reminded me of, we get to interview people and we get great quotes. Some of them we put into stories. Some of them we have on film. Some of them go viral. And this was really, that should have gone viral, and it kind of did. It's kind of redoing it again. But I just always remember my favorite quote while interviewing an athlete was, I tell this story today, by the way. The key to this, the person in this quote, Eric Grahalis, just got inducted in the Florida Hall of Fame. So congrats.
Shout
to
out
Eric.
Brandon High School.
Yeah, Brandon High School, the Streak. Pretty good. Russ Cozart done a pretty good job down there. And he had just beaten Dante Butler in, I think it was the Greco finals. And Dante
Missouri.
Butler, yeah, and Dante was a 5-time runner-up in Fargo, 6-time placer, 5-time second, never won it. And I'm interviewing. I was with Intermat at the time, and I got my little portable recorder, and I'm interviewing Eric, and this, I think it was a cadets, and Dante cuts in between us, cuts through the interview. Is you ain't shit, man. That's all I'm saying, or something like that. He was, a little edge to him. Eric, just like in middle interview, goes, dude, I just 5'd you, and then continues on with the interview. And I'm like, that was the greatest quip response that I had in my young career at that point. So,
that's amazing.
What do you got that comes to mind when it comes to quick quip? And Tom Brands cannot count, because he is a soundbite machine, unless it's in like the heat of the moment. Maybe like training for Robles. Well, you can't saw a guy's leg off or something. I think he said that in an interview once. But
one of my favorite Tom Brands quotes. I know he can't count, but
he can count because it's an Iowa show. Why can't we not count Tom Brands, right?
Because I have another one that comes to mind, but I'd love telling this story. So 1920 season, before COVID came and just ravaged. Whatever.
2019, 2020, not the 1920 season. I'm old, but I'm not that old, and Tom's not that old either.
Thanks for the clarification.
Here to help.
Yeah, so it's the week of the Iowa-Penn State duel, and there's the seating capacity at Carver, I want to say, is like 14,905 for wrestling. But we all know that there's every bit of 17,000 people in there for the right duel. And so I asked Tom that week at our weekly media availability, do you think the fire marshal will let 16,000 in? And he's just, I haven't heard that. Is that what the attendance is saying? Is that what, is it, asking around to nobody in particular, like what the attendance numbers might be or what the ticket sales are. And then just off the cuff goes into a endorsement of CAMBUS, which is the University of Iowa, student transit system. Just the most efficient organization on the planet. He makes a reference to the Miracle on 34th Street, the original one, which is one of his favorite movies. They said the post office was the most efficient organization on the planet. And he goes, that's hogwash. CAMBUS is the most efficient organization. And he's like, and Kirk Ferentz said so. And then he pounds his fist on the table. By God, I believe in Kirk Ferentz. Just a question about attendance turns into a rousing endorsement for CAMBUS. And it was the most magnificent. It was amazing.
And obviously that was not before the South Dakota game this year. So
that was not before the
South Dakota State game. Excuse me. Sorry. Hit below the belt there, Hawk fan. Sorry about that. I do love college football. So this is not a college football show, so I can throw shade when it comes to college football.
If you really want to throw shade, you'll tell Iowa fans that if Tucker Kraft didn't get hurt that day, the Jacks probably beat Iowa. But that's neither here nor there. So
They did just have
Another
to sit through a bunch of North Dakota State chatter, though, too. So there's also that.
Dude, speaking of South Dakota State, Jack Thompson announced today, Thursday, that Jack Thompson, Iowa State champion from Union of LaPorte City near Cedar Falls, actually announced today that he's transferring to Northern Iowa. So a little bit of transfer news there. He announced that on his Instagram. 57-65 guys should be a plug and play immediate contributor for the Panthers. Excited that he's going to come back home because he was always really fun to watch. Older brother Max was an All-American for the Panthers as well. So
Thompson without the P. Gotcha. That one.
There
That
you go.
crew. All right. Yeah, because I was like, wait, Laporte. Yeah, I know that. Okay, so you
Anyway.
got your Brand's quote. So your other one.
Same 2012 Olympic trials. I was a freshman at Iowa. I was writing for the Daily Iowan, the student newspaper, the award-winning student newspaper there in Iowa City. Good. And I was, do you remember the Joe Warren quote? You don't know who Joe Warren, do you? I'm the baddest mother effer on the planet. So my dumb ass asked that question. I don't even know what the question was, but he had just won his first match, and I was fumbling through a question because I was 19 and I didn't know how to ask questions at that point in time. I still sometimes don't. But that is what I don't remember the question I asked, but I remember his answer clear as day because he looked me dead in the camera and said, "You don't know Joe Warren, do you? I'm the baddest motherfucker on the planet."
I've got a beat for you. I'm ready for that one.
And I'm just like 19, first big assignment of my journalism career. I didn't sleep the night before because I'm also still I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I'm just like, oh.
Dude, okay. You were a freshman in college. That is, the wrestling fan had nothing to do with why you were not sleeping. Okay, I've been to Main Street. I know the deal.
I wasn't even going out drinking that night. I was only 19.
Liar. Oh yeah, like that stopped anybody before in college.
But yeah, like that was that I was just like, oh, okay. And then thankfully there were like other professionals around me. Like I'm pretty sure Zeb was probably there, Bader was probably there, and somebody asked an actual question as opposed to whatever the heck I said. And had a good, we ended up having a pretty good interview. But Joe Warren was super animated, and that was just kind of like, oh, okay.
Talk about why you're the baddest mother on the planet.
There you go.
That's a good one. I'm going to finally get to use the censored beep in one of my shows, thankfully.
There you go. Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. Like obviously when you cover Tom Brands and Kevin Dresser and Doug Schwab, there was one time, so not a football podcast, but so when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes the first time, where they had to come back, trying to think, divisional round, they beat the Houston Texans. They were down like 24-0 in the first quarter and came back to take the lead 28-24 by halftime. I was very unprofessional that day because it was a Sunday and I could be casual or whatever. And so I wore a Chief shirt that day while I was covering a UNI duel. And so after the duel, it was halftime, and Doug Schwab looks down at my shirt, sees that it's a Chief shirt, and he's like, "Hey, are they playing? How are they doing?" And I was like, "Well, they just rallied from down 24-0 to take the 28-24 lead at halftime." And he goes, "No bleep?" And then just start we spent the first minute of the post-duel interview talking about the Chiefs game. I was just like, yeah, man, like Pat's that dude. Like that's, and then, 3 weeks later they end up going to win the Super Bowl. So that was a fun time. That was really cool.
Always like when the wrestling interview we end up talking about something else. It's like I remember like Hall of Fame weekend last year. I remember talking to Kale about sneakers, or other time I sent him a case of I actually sent him a case of those Hostess fruit pies, because the gag was, he's notoriously tough to get interviews with, just if you're not Penn State media right there. So I was like, hey, we were texting one about something unrelated, and I was like, well, hey, how about next time I need to get an interview with you, I'll give you a fruit pie. He goes, deal. So before the start of the season one year, I sent him a case of Hostess fruit pie, no return address on it. And, so I get a text message from Kale with a picture of this box delivered to Hostess fruit pies. He goes, "You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" So I do think Kale did come on the show that year, so I'm not quite sure. He still needs to he's got about 23 more fruit pies to make up for. So the things we do to bribe our way to quote sometimes. Fruit pies, didn't expect that one. Maybe I'll get a good juicy soundbite. He did have a good soundbite that we'll talk about it another time about on Short Time back in the day. But lastly, you've got something, and we're talking more media matters here as we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what you think about this. I've started to notice this recently that Flow Wrestling posting a lot more native video, and they're doing a lot of different things, right? They're doing full matches, full highlights of matches, full scoring sequences of matches, or multiple matches, or like I think the most recent one that I just so happened to glance on was, they showed all of Thomas Gilman's points from the Pan American Championships. Because I think he blanked everybody en route to gold. But another thing that they're doing, and this is, you and I being media nerds notice things that maybe other people don't notice, is one of the things that Flow Wrestling's starting to do when they post native video is I call them CPSAs, like Christian Piles, basically just kind of opining or talking about various happenings in the wrestling world. Like I think recently he, you know, two-part video thing of what Penn State's lineup might look like. He gave a lot of detail about the whole Cody Chittum thing. When that went down, he actually cited my story in that one, and I really appreciate that. He did a little bit of a longer essay on Spencer Lee after he defaulted out of the semifinals at the US Open. It's just something different that they're doing. And I don't know how I feel about it yet. I have found myself, when it came to the Chittum and the Spencer Lee thing, I stopped and I watched them. I stopped scrolling and I watched them. Haven't watched the, Penn State ones yet. It's like a combination of like, here's a little bit more context slash here's maybe an opinion you haven't considered, or maybe here's my opinion, or here's kind of the full story type video essays. Have you seen them? How do you, what do you make of these? It's just an interesting development, right?
I think some of them are callbacks a little bit. So obviously, FRL. I think part of it is because they don't have the 3 FRLs during the off season. So they have 2 during. They usually do 3. I think what is it? Monday, Wednesday, Thursday is what their typical schedule is. And then there's also the Bader Show, which is a show that Mark Bader does, aptly named, where he interviews people and such. Kyle sometimes jumps on with him, but I think it's because that's one of the usually an FRL type of talking point, or it's something that's come up on one of their discussions that comes into it breaks off in something else. I think maybe that's the process is, okay, well, we didn't have a chance to really go into detail on this, and I didn't have a chance to, force my opinion down on Ben and JD much more. But back before FRL started, Christian did this thing called Preaching with CP, where he kind of did this. This is when he was still living in Virginia. He had the black curtain around, and it was like almost this like soliloquy of giving again his perspective. So I think it's a little bit of a callback to that, and it's also a supplement more to CP's been a forward facing face of the show and the brand for a couple years, if not more. It's a lot longer than that. It's almost seems like, geez, he's been there a while now. So there's that opportunity. It's like, okay, here's me not being interrupted by Ben and JD or Shane to give a piece, or and then what I've also think I've noticed with and I'm not saying this idea is from anybody else, but looking at how their graphics are, like who can stop Gilman? I'm scrolling through because I've got a feed of their YouTube channel in my Discord, so I get the updates pretty quickly, and I put some of them in my newsletter. But it's like, and the graphics, like who goes where. And of course the Penn State thing is funny, I think, because of, again, the quip, the Kale quip, like you got a plan or something, that one that CP was famously kind of talked back from with Kale on. So I think a little bit is, again, the lack of the third FRL show. It's a callback to CP being able to get his viewpoint out uninterrupted. And then the other videos, and I don't mean this is not a negative thing, but they do look a lot like what Fanco did with how the graphics look good before Josiah would go on, like, here are the top 5, or a list or something exciting. It's a cool, catchy looking graphic. And no, Fanco did not invent graphics on the internet. We've been through that before, but it's also a thing that it works. This catchy graphic works, and it's a clip and it's a highlight. And I think it's aimed at catching the drive-by wrestling fan, because CP or me or you doing a rant about something, if it's not 10 seconds a clip or a story or something, it's not going to draw you in, or a Facebook reel or something like, or Instagram reel, whatnot. But I think those little videos are getting people to suck in. Like, oh, I'm looking at this, and then you stay for the long form stuff. And long form, even this is maybe 6 minutes or something. So I like it because what it does, is it gives people another reason to come in because you're going to Fanco got a ton of subscribers, and he had a ton of subscribers before I even knew who he was. So I'm like, well, who are all these people watching wrestling that don't know my show? It's not like I can be in this bubble like, well, who doesn't know Matt Talk? But there's twice as many, 3, 4, 5, 10 times as many people are watching Fanco. So what Josiah did really well with Fanco is catching people with graphics and simple stories and storylines. I think where CP I'm not saying CP's doing this because of Fanco. For his part, there's two different moving parts here. But to take the soliloquy, the as you say, the what did you call it? The CP what?
The CPSA.
The essay, yeah, to take the audio essay, the personal essay, I like soliloquy actually a little better. But to take that out there and then give you a fuller talking point, I like it. Whether or not I agree with him or not, and whether or not him and I, or me and you for specifically, I don't think we're the target market for that type of content because we've got our own opinions, and we'll seek out content. I mean, I don't think it's geared for the junkie. It's geared for his stuff, yeah, a little bit more for that. I want to know a little bit more, but I think the highlight and the graphics, the quick hits on lineup things, that's for the drive-by wrestling fan to get him interested. So I think it's a smart play. It goes to what seems to work. They've got a lot of people that work on the social media and analytics and stuff there, so they clearly know what works in a lot of ways. And the essays are a part of that. But I do think the catchier graphics, the quick hits, the highlight reel type of stuff is good for wrestling. I think it's good for Flow Sports. I think it's good to get people in because it's not like, okay, we've done that once, we've got them. No, because every 4 years you're losing your high school fan base and you have to grow them back more. I saw this with premium service when I was at Intermat. Every year I'd lose X amount of people because all those people graduated. Then I'd have to replace them. So I was there for about a 3.5 year cycle. So I had a lot of turnover with the premium service. So you got to keep your fans coming back. It's not like, okay, and if you don't ring that bell, like they say in all the YouTube videos, you're not going to get them all. So you got to entice them to come back for more and then keep them for more than the 4 years. So I like them.
Yeah, I think that I haven't watched them all, but I do. I've enjoyed just the different type of social strategies, I guess, because like social media, like it's I tend to do most of my social media engagement on Twitter.
Mhm.
So that's obviously where I spend the bulk of my time. And so when I see different things like that, or people trying different things, like it's just something I tend to notice. So yeah, I think it could be a good thing. I haven't really seen a lot of negative reaction to it. I've never really thought anything negative about it. It's just something different that I've noticed and something that's kind of intrigued me. And, I think one of the fun parts about doing a podcast with you is that, you're a seasoned media guy. I'm kind of a younger media age type of guy. We got different perspectives here. So just curious to kind of see what you thought and maybe, as I see more of it or, some other things that we see in wrestling media, social media, actual media, content creation, that sort of thing, be kind of fun to just bounce things off of each other. So yeah, I thought it was interesting. It looks like it's something that they're going to continue at least probably through, the spring and summer months. I wonder how much it'll just be a part of their social plan moving forward, or if they'll pivot to something else once we,
It could
maybe
just
get
be
close.
spaghetti and throwing it to the wall and see if it hits.
Yeah.
Who knows how many different things I've tried over my, I don't know how many, 20, I don't even know. Jeez. Every time I think about this, I'm getting old. By the way, happy birthday again, Jagger, because he's going to say I was 12. But I just think about all the things I've tried over the years, and some work, some haven't. We've had almost 30 different podcasts come and go on just this network alone. So, some things are not always going to be permanent, Flow is a good example of that with remember Technique Wave? That was the thing. And then now it's not. And then big live duels was a thing before they even had all these live contracts. And now it's the biggest part of their thing. It's not campus tours anymore like it used to be. They still do that, but they'll bring them back. They'll go here and they'll have a series, and these documentaries they're doing. It's evolving. It's not like you have to do this one thing the whole way. I've struggled with that with Short Time, for example. It started out as a 5-minute update show, and then the season ended. Like, well, crap, what do I do now? Well, I'll pivot to interviews, and then sometimes you got to take a little break. I've tried I've tried the audio essay. I've tried that type of the rant at the beginning, the rant at the end. You don't know what works until you try it, and that's the one thing we have in this media age. It's not like we take up print space with let's try this, and now you're taking 12 to 15 inches out of a space that could have been gone to a feature story versus some editor's opinion or some beat writer opinion on something that about self checkout at the Target. Who knows? So I like throwing spaghetti to the wall and seeing what works because it gives you different looks. And if anything, it also may inspire somebody else to come up with a concept. And it's like, you know what? I like that. I'm going to do it a little differently. And then that takes off for somebody else. I mean, it's like, what was it? Good coaches coach, great coaches steal, so you can be inspired by an idea, kind of like, call back to the whole graphics on the internet thing. You can be inspired by someone else's concept, but you don't really know if it works until you try it. So kudos to trying something. Maybe it's a callback. Maybe it's something new. Maybe it's like, all right, we just need some extra content, or who knows? I mean, I don't have a direct line of communication with those guys frequently. I do talk to them fairly regularly, but it's not, I'm not digging into their hey, well, why are you doing this? So that's for us to talk about and discuss, and maybe they'll respond to it. Maybe they're like, hey, yeah, here's why we're doing it. That'd be cool. But I like the cool graphics. Like I'm looking at this picture right now. Who should cut, bump, and sit with Tom Ryan? And it's a good looking graphic, and it makes me want to click on that. So it's eye catching. It's again, that's the type of stuff me as the wrestling junkie will click on as a drive by. I'll be the drive by stuff, the YouTube shorts and things like that. UWW does a great job with. I mean, I've got stuff that's in Cyrillic. They've got like people in Ukraine and in all the country. There's maybe some athletes from Russia or Croatia and Serbia and stuff they'll, I don't know, kind of do takeovers and whatnot. Not like Instagram takeovers, but there's like practice footage. And I'm like, oh, that's quick. And it's boom, there's 30,000 views on it. So, it's not a new concept. It's just trying to see what content within those concepts that work. So
Yeah,
go for it.
I had an English teacher when I was in college tell me, write the story that you want to read, and in the same vein, create the content that you want to watch and consume. So, the idea of throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks and seeing if it works and tweaking it from there, or maybe you like it and you then want to go from there to try something else. All for it. All for it. Just one of those, now that we're kind of into the slower part of the wrestling calendar, one of the things I noticed and was just kind of curious what you thought, because I know I brought it up the last couple of weeks and we just haven't been able to get it on the show yet.
Well, we're all in a situation where we put ourselves out there. I mean, you put yourself out there with just working in a newspaper, and then the mailbags, interacting with people, and then video shows. It's not like we're doing, or we got the live show right now, so we could get a comment right away that just calls it that say we suck. It's something like that. Putting yourself out there. You put yourself at you're vulnerable, and some people like CP, some people don't like CP, some people like me. They don't like they do, they don't. I mean, we all have our fans and our critics. So it's one of those things, like you just move forward with what you like you said, the story you want to read. Here's the video here's the opinion I want to say, and here's how I want to do it. And so why not do it? So, throw it to the wall, see if it sticks. I love that.
100%. 100%. That's all I got on my list. You got anything else before we sign out of here?
Yeah, I actually was going to bring this up because I have, again, the historical archive dungeon that is in here. I figured, what, my random feature that I'm probably going to not stick with very long is I'm going to grab a random amateur wrestling news. And since this is a Des Moines Register-based show, I'm going to go as far as I can to get to the first Iowa reference, whether it be Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, or in some cases, Iowa State Teachers College, Cornell College, based on what year the amateur wrestling news is. But this one was a pile of old amateur wrestling news is that Andy Saris, the old coach at Sacred Heart and former Greco, U.S. beast back in the 80s and 90s, sent me as he was moving. And this one's from January 14th, 1980. So it took me zero time to get to the first reference because this is a story by Rob Sherrill.
Hey!
It's all Iowa in Midlands. So the front is, and it's got the poll, and then there's a story about, let's see, Randy Lewis, hit by the loss of two starters, Trezino and Deanna, in a dual meet loss to Cal Poly. The University of Iowa lost their number one ranking to Oklahoma State in December 24th ratings, but on the basis of their domination of the Midlands, in which Randy Lewis and Ed Bannock won individual titles, they returned to the top. So front page amateur wrestling news, there's two Iowa references. And then there's, Jess Hoke, actually still alive at this point. And his son John just got our award, which you talked about last time. But I'm going to randomly pull an amateur wrestling news and see how quickly we can get to a state of Iowa reference for your readership. And right now, it's all Iowa Midlands in January 1980, right away. So
I like that.
a little blast of the past. Because I was born, but I definitely wasn't reading, and I definitely didn't know what wrestling was till about 15 years after that. Yikes.
1980 was before my parents were even married by 5 years.
You'd mentioned that. Yeah. I was born in the 70s, so I am older than Alexander Kikinov. Again, he's in much better shape than I am. I think that's where we wrap here, Cody, is old jokes in the 1980 amateur wrestling news.
Oh, that's awesome. Great show again today, JB. That's all we got today, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Probably back sometime next week, early to mid next week, maybe wrap the World Team Trials and talk about some other things, whatever makes our list of things that we're interested in during that given week, I suppose. Until then, be sure to rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Subscribe to the Des Moines Register. I want to make sure you guys don't miss any of our wrestling coverage at any point in the wrestling calendar. Make sure to tap into Matt Talk Online. JB, what else do you got cooking that people should be paying attention to or following along for?
Well, we are 2 weeks away from Honors Weekend, and I am working diligently to try to get the first episode of the Gray Simons podcast done and released by then. So I did another interview this morning. I actually talked to Wade Chalice for a bit this morning. But an interesting side note about how Wade Chalice almost went to Lockhaven and how that potentially disrupted the path of wrestling in the late 60s and early 70s. So little side note that I did know because I talked to Coach Simon's wife yesterday as part of this series. I think I've done 10, 11 interviews about this series so far. So there's some cool stuff that I'm unearthing with this. I'm looking to have episode 1 out there for the National Wrestling Hall of Fame's Etched in Stone series in the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully by Honors Weekend. But that's what I'm working on right now. It's been a year in the making. And I better get one of these things out because I interviewed Gray for this thing last June. So, yeah, she'll be coming around the mountain when this show finally ends. Dad jokes, bad jokes, whatever. That's all I
got. You can find links to connect with JB, me, as well as stories from this past week in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, you guys, and for tuning in. We'll talk to you again soon.